Welcome to Garden Delights. I'm Susan Howington, Family Consumer Science Agent with the Henry County Cooperative Extension, partnership with the University of Georgia. Today we've got a great show for you. We're going to talk about tomatoes and all the wonderful things about those tomatoes that are coming in your gardens. Now's the time to buy them in the grocery store if you don't have a garden because they're going to be at their best. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about those tomatoes and we're going to end up making that tomato zucchini bake. See you in just a little bit. Welcome back to Garden Delights. We're going to be talking about tomatoes today, and we're going to make tomato zucchini bake. And we hope you're going to like it, and we'll do that toward the end of the show. But let's talk about those tomatoes. You know, about a medium-sized tomato is about 30 calories, low fat, it's high in vitamin A, vitamin C, and it gives you, an adult, half of what you need as far as your vitamin C if you eat a medium tomato in one day. It's also a very good source of potassium. So is this a fruit or a vegetable? Depends on which way you want to look at it. If it's cultivated and used, it's a vegetable. But if it's botanically used, it's what we call a fruit. So it's up to you which way you want to go. It can be a fruit or a vegetable. Going back to reason why we can say it's a fruit, it also has seeds in it, just like a plump strawberry or other fruits out there. The difference is, the reason why we can call this a fruit is because it does have seeds on the inside. It doesn't have a stone seed, for example, like a peach. So that means you can cut it open, eat the whole thing. You can eat it just like an apple if you wanted to. When you're selecting your tomatoes, you want to make sure, and you can tell that we've had a lot of rain this summer. So you can tell that when tomatoes have a lot of rain, they end up splitting a little bit, but this one doesn't still look bad. And what I love is the smell of tomatoes. So when you're picking them out, you know, smell them a little bit because that just tells you how fresh they are. You do want to make sure that they look smooth, have a good color, they don't have any bruises or blemishes on them because that's what you want to do when you're selecting them. Of course, if they're growing out in your garden, you know, you have a better chance of picking them right when you need to pick them and bring them into your house. Now, once you have your tomato, you selected it, tomatoes do best if you don't put them in the refrigerator. If you put them in the refrigerator, they're going to lose flavor. So the best thing you can do for a tomato is to leave this out on your counter away from the sunlight now because you don't want it to ripen, but very slowly. So you can leave this about 1 week out. If it starts to get, getting ripened as far as the tomatoes goes, you want to make sure you put this in the refrigerator, and that is going to prolong it. You can also freeze and you can can tomatoes. So that's my favorite thing about a tomato. They are wonderful frozen, they're wonderful canned. Let's talk about freezing them. If you're going to freeze them, there's two ways to do this. You could chop them up if you wanted to, or you could take them and take the skins off. You do want to make sure you take your skins off. And the way you can do this, you don't have to core it first. You just want to make sure you have some boiling water. You're going to drop this tomato in the boiling water, and once you do that, it will make the skin come off a lot easier. You can take it and do it in quarters, or you can chop it up, or you can leave it whole. Just remember, when it comes out frozen and you thawed it out, it's not going to look plump like a tomato does. So you want to make sure that you remember that when you're freezing. But they freeze well, and once you bring them out, they're going to taste just as great as when you picked them that summer. Canning is wonderful for tomatoes. They can wonderful, but there's two different methods you could use for canning. You can do the boiling water method, and that's an easy method, and that's where you just boil water, and it has to go over the jar that you're going to have. It has to have about 1 inch of water over that canning. The only bad thing about doing it, if it's hot in your kitchen and you're going to be canning them and you're going to do the water bath method, the only drawback is they have to go for so many minutes, and tomatoes are going to have to go usually around 45 to 50 minutes in a water bath. But if you want to pressure can those, you can cut the time in half by pressure canning. And so tomatoes work very well either way, in a water bath or a pressure canner. So either way that you want to try it because you cannot beat a tomato bringing it back out, either canned or frozen. to make it later into whatever you're going to do, if it's going to be a tomato sauce. And you know, you can even bring them back out and make a fresh salsa with them once they thawed out. So that's the good thing about a tomato. It's very versatile as far as eating it right now, or we can prolong it and eat it later and eat it in the summer. So when we come back, we're going to hear from Frank Hancock, and he's going to talk more about tomatoes, and he's going to show you some plants that we have that we've been growing. And then I'm going to make that tomato zucchini bake. We'll see you back in just a little bit.
Today we're going to talk about growing tomatoes, and then later on we're going to go inside. Susan Harrington's going to be fixing us a dish using some tomatoes. Everybody likes to grow tomatoes. Generally, tomatoes are not hard to grow, but there are a lot of challenges with growing tomatoes. You've got to have good soil. We've talked about soil in some of the other segments, but you've got to have soil that's got some organic matter in it. They like a pH around 6.2 to 6.5, and all those things are important to stop some of the issues that you have with tomatoes. But one of the biggest things that you got to do if you're going to grow tomatoes is you've got to rotate them. You can't plant tomatoes in the same place every year. Now, I get calls from a lot of people, and they say they just can't rotate them and all that. Well, if you can't rotate them, then I suggest that you get some containers and grow them in containers. You can grow more tomatoes off of a healthy tomato plant than you can grow off of 10 tomato plants that's sitting in the same spot every year that have got every kind of disease known to man. You'll see on these tomatoes we're looking at today, we've got some wilt going on. We've got either fusarium or verticulum wilt. There's also tomato spotted wilt virus that you can get. I'm going to pull some of these plants out and we'll send them off and find out exactly what they've got. But they're going to have it. These are soil-borne diseases, and there's not much cure for them other than rotate. You don't want to grow tomatoes in the same place, but like every 4 years. If you do it every 5 years, that would even be better. Rotate it, find a different place to plant them every year, and also keep in mind that tomatoes and potatoes and peppers and eggplants, all those things are in the same family. They suffer from the same diseases. So get you a rotation plan. Everybody likes to grow their own variety of tomato. They want to have an heirloom tomato that a lot of times don't produce very well. They're not resistant to any diseases that tomatoes get, and it just gets to be almost impossible over time to grow them. So select varieties that show resistant to diseases, and there's a list. We've got a brochure that tells you the different varieties and what they're resistant to, but as far as these wilts are concerned, they need to be resistant to verticulum wilt. Fusarium wilt has got 3 different varieties of it, so you want at least 1 and 2, sometimes 1, 2, and 3 is even better, but you're going to have to select those. The only other option that you might have in the way of growing tomatoes would be to grow some grafted tomatoes. Grafting's gone on forever. A lot of greenhouse producers that want to grow a particular variety, they will take a rootstock that is known to be vigorous and resistant to all these diseases, and they will graft the variety they want to on top of that tomato and on top of that rootstock, and they will grow that way. That might be feasible in a homeowner situation where you're just growing a few plants that you try to graft some, and that way you can grow the variety you want on a rootstock that's resistant. Some of these rootstocks, Maxiport is one of them, they don't grow very good tomatoes. They are just, they're not that good a tomato, but they got roots on them that are resistant. So we may talk about that in another segment about how to go about grafting some tomatoes, but that's about your only option. Rotate them, get the soil built up like it's supposed to be, space them far enough apart so that you can get some air circulation coming through them, and then from there, You just got to watch out for the insects and the things that get on them. We've had a lot of rain this year. With a lot of rain, you get things like fruit cracking. The tomato grows and it kind of sets up and gets it gets a little bit hard on the outside, and then it starts raining again, and you get another burst of growth, and it cracks the tomato open when it tries to grow against that harder skin. So some varieties are more susceptible to cracking than others, but this is an example of what happens when you get the tomatoes in a real rainy season. The rainy season also has contributed a lot to our wilts and things that are soil-borne. You want to put a good layer of straw, similar to this bed right here, to try to keep those diseases, that fungus, from bouncing up off the ground when it rains and getting on those lower leaves. Other things that you run into during the wet season is you run into pollination problems, where the blooms kind of stick together because they're wet and the tomato doesn't pollinate like it's supposed to. And you get some pretty strange looking tomatoes coming out of it. There's nothing wrong with that tomato, it just probably had a bloom stuck together when it was pollinating. The other thing that happens on these diseased tomatoes where those leaves are coming off, it exposes the tomato to the sun, and you get a lot of sunburn that causes the tomato just to sit there and rot on the vine. And this is kind of an example of some sunburn. You can see where this has gotten real mushy here, where it's been exposed to the sun because all the leaf cover is gone. Something else that can work to get rid of your leaf cover is the tomato hornworm. He can do a lot of damage in a short while. What you notice with a tomato hornworm is you'll start to see branches that have no leaves on them. The leaves are gone. You start to see fruit that's been eaten out in the side, like somebody took a bite out of it. And a little bit closer examination, when you see those kind of things, is you'll find a tomato hornworm. There he is right there hanging under the branch, and they're hard to see. You have to really concentrate to be able to see them because they're camouflaged. BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, will work on the hornworms and get rid of them. But the other thing you can do is just take them off and just throw them in some soapy water and just get rid of them. So you just don't have to have him on there, and you don't have to spray anything to get rid of him. We can dispose of him right now. So that's what goes on with those. If you can't rotate, like I said, you can grow the tomatoes in a container. Here's one that we transplanted a couple of weeks ago. Somebody gave us some plants that had, they were about dead, but we transplanted them and got them back to life here. They had some insect infestation that ate a few holes in our leaves. I don't know if we got one here that we can see, but I sprayed it last week with some Azagard. We talked about that in one of our last segments, an organic insect control. So, and they seem to be under control now. I don't see any more damage from it. So we'll see what happens with this tomato as we go along. But that's just some things to think about. It's been a wet season. We got a lot of tomato plants that are dying from the ground up. A lot of people are talking about that. So now's a good time to think about how you're going to rotate your tomato plants, how you're going to select varieties that are resistant to some of these diseases, and everybody can get back into tomato production. If you have gotten frustrated with your tomatoes this year, come on down to the Henry County Farmers Market. We got lots of tomatoes on Thursdays from 2 to 6. So now let's go inside and see what Susan's got fixed up and eat some tomatoes.
going to start making that tomato zucchini bake. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to make it. It's very, very simple. I made it for our office and they really liked it. We all thought it tastes very similar like a pizza without the bread. So if you're on a diet, this could be your pizza that you're looking for without eating all the bread. So I'm going to tell you a little bit how to make it. What I've done already, just so you'll know, tomatoes, it's going to ask for about 4 tomatoes. And it depends on your dish. I'm going to use a pie pan dish today because I want it to look like a pizza, and I'm going to kind of slice it like a pizza. But you can use a 8x8 pan size, so it's your preference on what you might want to do. Tomatoes, you know, when we're going to work with them, any kind of fruit or vegetable, you have to wash them. So I've already washed these tomatoes, and as you can see, they have been peeled. And for this recipe, you do have to peel your tomatoes. What I'm going to go ahead and do is you're going to need zucchini also for this, and it asks for about 3 mediums, so I have about 3 medium zucchini. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, because when I make the recipe, the layer, which we consider kind of like the bread, but it's not the bread, is going to be that zucchini because that's going to kind of hold it together. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is chop the zucchini up and get it ready because I'm going to put it it's going to be my base to this recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick and get my slices ready. Now I do want to tell you this for the recipe. It's going to tell you to cut your zucchini and your tomatoes thinly because you're not going to cook this long and it's not going to take you long to bake it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these up and make them really thin slices, and we're going to layer these. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and get me some started. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with my zucchini and slice them up pretty thin. And this is going to be my base. And once I get this done, I'm going to start layering it with the zucchini and then the tomatoes. And this, to me, is really easy to make, and it's really good. And you can see just this zucchini right here is, just this one is adding up to a good mint to go in this pie pan. This is going to serve around 6 people, and this serves a pretty good size for everybody. So it just depends on how much you want to make of it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop with this, and I am going to go ahead and cut up at least one of these tomatoes. Now you know tomatoes, just like any other fruit or vegetable, it's going to hold water. So you're going to have a little bit of water that you're going to have to deal with tomatoes. But I've already peeled these, and these have not been in the refrigerator. So, and you can see when I first slice it, it's not going to be the total round like you want it. But what I'm trying to do is just get me a good tomato where I can layer it later. And I'm cutting these pretty thin also because it just bakes a lot even if we have them all about the same size. So I'm just going to keep cutting these tomatoes up. I'm going to flip this one to the back. Try to get something off the back end of this one. And as you can see, that's not a whole lot of tomatoes once I start chopping. You're going to have a lot more zucchini than you will tomatoes. So I'm going to start on another tomato, and I'm going to keep slicing it pretty thin. And as you can see, I've almost got what I'm going to need for at least a couple of my layers, and I'll come back and slice some more of my tomatoes in just a second. But I just want to show you how it's going to start with your layers. Okay, so we've got a little bit of tomatoes, we've got a little bit of zucchini already sliced up. You're also going to need cheese, and this is Parmesan cheese. This is about a cup of Parmesan cheese, and the reason why I have it split out is because we're going to use 1/4 of this Parmesan cheese for the first layer, and after we get it all layered, we'll put the rest of that Parmesan cheese on top. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this zucchini, and I'm going to start layering it in the bottom of this pan. And it's really easy. You just kind of make a little circle, however you want to do it. I'm just going to keep layering it till I get what I need to get 2 layers. Now, if you don't like zucchini and you like squash better, you could trade out and do squash. If you don't like squash at all, you could do onion in it too, because I love tomato and onion mixed up with a little bit of Italian dressing. You just can't beat it, so it's really, really good. So it's up to you on how you want to do this. And I'm just going to fill in with some small ones in the little gaps. And that's about all I'm going to do for that layer. Now I'm going to take some of these tomatoes, and I'm going to lay those around and layer those on top of the zucchini. So you can see, if you got somebody coming over, you need something pretty quick, this makes a quick meal. It's very tasty with all the different ingredients that's going to go into it. So let's see if I can get most of these tomatoes that I just cut up on this layer. And I think I'm going to make it. And then you got to add your 1/4 of a cup or your Parmesan cheese first. That's your first layer. That's the reason why we want just a little bit to keep it intact. So we're going to make sure that we add that part. And I took fresh Parmesan cheese. I just like sometimes to do it fresh because it just tastes better. And you can tell that it's fresh because usually when you buy Parmesan cheese, it's very thin grated, but I like the thicker look because I feel like it's going to melt a lot easier too. Now we're going to add the zucchini. So we do a first layer of zucchini, then tomatoes, 1/4 of a cup of the Parmesan cheese. Like I said, 3 medium zucchini, but you may not need 3 medium. It depends on, how you want to arrange it. So you can see that I may not use this other one, and believe it, I'm not going to discard it. I'm definitely going to eat it. Somehow I'll eat the zucchini. So we're just going to fan this around, make another little circle. And then once we get this done, I'm going to come back again with the tomatoes. So as you can see, it did not take all this, and it really depends on the size of your zucchini as far as what you're going to need. So I'm going to go again with my tomatoes, but first I am going to see if I can get some of this liquid. You see how much liquid is coming out of these tomatoes. So, and you want some pretty good ripe tomatoes, but you definitely want to make sure they don't have any bruises. They stay intact, and this one's doing really well and keeping that little circle going. So I'm going to keep slicing this up, and I'm going to have to slice the other one. So it's going to take about 4 medium tomatoes to make the circle. So we're going to keep slicing the tomato. Go ahead and add this on here so you kind of get the hang of what it's going to look like. And you can see this doesn't, this is just like a pie pan, so it's not going to be high up on the edges. And so I'm continuing to cut the 4th tomato, and I'm doing it pretty thin as usual. See what we got here. And if you use larger tomatoes, you won't need as many. So it's really whatever you have coming out of your garden, whatever your favorite tomato is going to tell you what size you're going to have. So just remember that all tomatoes are different. There are different varieties out there, and you're going to be able to pick your favorite one. And if you wanted to use aroma tomato, you could do that. And those will go really nice as far as a circle. I'm going to try to get as much as I can off of that one. And we're almost to fill this one up too with our last layer of tomatoes. And I'm just going to kind of pat it a little bit just to make sure. So that was pretty easy. So what are we going to add next to it? This is garlic, and so we're going to be adding garlic, and it asks you to have 2 cloves of garlic, and it asks you to have it minced. So this is already ready to go, and I'm just going to take my fingers and use my fingers because I feel like if I can do it that way, I can kind of have control over kind of putting it out in different places around the casserole. So I'm going to make sure I get all the rest of that garlic off. Okay, so we have the garlic. And then you also want to sprinkle thyme, and this is going to give it that pizza taste. And if you don't like this, you probably could use oregano, but you do want to make sure it's dried and not the ground because it can be stronger either way. This is about 1 teaspoon. So what I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it around because I want to make sure it gets on all the tomatoes. And it's really neat how this works. It will soak all the way down through this, and you'll get the flavor all through this layer. So I'm going to keep sprinkling. And doesn't it kind of already make you think of a pizza anyway? Because, it just feels like fresh ingredients, just like a pizza. So I want to make sure I get all this on here. Sprinkle it around. All right. So that was 1 teaspoon. Okay, we have that. And now 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm just going to kind of drizzle this on here just to give it a little bit of flavor too, and also to make it all mixed in together. And if you don't want to use all this olive oil, you can cut it back to 1 tablespoon if that's what you'd rather do. but it just gives that little oil taste to it, just kind of like you were doing your pizza. So if you had a piece of pita bread and you want to do your pizza, you could just take sliced tomatoes and put it on top of a pita bread, and then come back and do the same thing with this herb that I'm using, a little bit of olive oil, sprinkle a little bit of cheese on it, and you would have a wonderful pizza. So now, this is the rest of that cup of cheese. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to sprinkle it around. And just look how easy this is. And your family, if you have company coming over, they'll be really impressed that it looks like you went to a lot of trouble to make this, which you did not have to do a lot of trouble, and it's very easy. So I'm just going to keep sprinkling around there. And see, this part just covers it up just about right on that. And you know, once it starts melting, it's going to move out to the sides too. So I'm just going to make sure it's spread out a little bit. And that is what we call tomato zucchini bake. And like I said, this is going to bake for about 20 to 25 minutes in a 400-degree oven. And once you have it ready, you're going to be able to bring it out, slice it up, and it's going to look wonderful and taste wonderful. So when we come back, Frank's going to join us. We're going to be tasting this tomato zucchini bake. So we'll see you in just a little bit. Welcome back to Garden Delights. We have Frank with us, and we're going to try this tomato zucchini bake. I hope that you're going to end up taking this recipe off that website and you're going to use it. And now you can see what it looks like coming out of that oven. Doesn't it look just like a great pizza without the bread? Now I will tell you, like I talked earlier, the water from those vegetables are going to be at the bottom. But once you take it out of the casserole dish or whatever you have it in, it's going to stay in there. So once you put it onto your plate, it's not going to be a big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and cut Frank and us and see how well it does. I'm going to kind of cut it just like a pizza. Do a little slice, and I'm going to get Frank his first one so he can start on it and try it and see what he thinks. But it's coming out just like a little pizza. Okay. And that's a nice serving size right there. I'm going to trade out with you, Frank, and grab the other plate.
I've been waiting all summer for these tomatoes to get ripe. It's been a little bit cool this summer and a little slow getting them started, but now they're here.
They are here. So I hope you're going to like this. These tomatoes actually were grown locally here. We have somebody that's at our farmer's market that was willing to give up some of his tomatoes and zucchini. So you're tasting local grown right here.
That's right.
In Henry County. What do you think?
It's very good. It does taste a lot like pizza.
It really does. And if you cut everything thin, it works out really great as far as everything being tender, not mushy. The cheese kind of keeps it intact. Remember, tomato, zucchini, bake. Put it in your recipe file. Go to the website to get your recipe, which is tomato, zucchini, bake. We'll see you next time on Garden Delights.